Visual differences between Power Pivot versions. If you're familiar with Power Pivot 2010, you'll probably think that there's not much of a difference. Well, you're kind of right. Take a look at the screen. This is Power Pivot 2010. You have your Power Pivot window, detection, your ribbon. It looks great. Now let's take a look at the 2013. It's changed a bit. Notice that the Power Pivot window is no longer named the same. In fact, it's called Manage now. Now you have your calculated fields and KPIs there showing, along with having an Analyze and Design ribbon bars on top. So there are a few things that you have to be aware of there. As mentioned, these are the big three ones that you have to contemplate: the Home, Design, and Advanced Power Pivot ribbon tabs. Each one of these has their own purpose in mind. For instance, the Home ribbon tab. This one is what it looks like. It contains all your connections to retrieve data, formatting, filtering, and sorting. Some calculations and views at the same time. In a certain way, it contains a lot of what you would see in your normal Excel formatting and Home tab itself. Once you switch to the Design one, things are a little bit more compact, and they revolve around calculations, columns, and your relationships around, what you can do with them mostly, how to manage them. Lastly, your Advanced ribbon tab. This one is very compact. In fact, it's used mostly for perspectives and some reporting properties. Perspectives are really a small way of viewing your data in Power Pivot in a different fashion, kind of like views in SQL or even Access itself. Creating our first Power Pivot workbook. This is what we're going to need. Microsoft Access 2013. This is going to be used to access the Northwind Access database, the Northwind Access database itself, which is provided, and Microsoft Excel 2013. What we'll be doing before we get into the demo is we're going to be creating a data connection, which will be done by choosing your data source. You have been probably familiar with what we've done so far. Getting it to refer to Access 2013 and target the Northwind Access database. That said, let's go ahead and create our first Power Pivot workbook. Let's open Excel and start with a blank workbook. We're going to click on Power Pivot, Manage, and now that we're inside Power Pivot, we're going to get our external data from the database and from Access. We're going to browse to our module, which is number 3. Click Northwind, test a connection, and notice that it's been already named for us. We can change it if we want, but this is close enough. Click Next, and we're going to select from the list of tables. Click Next once again, and I'm going to start with Order Details. Select all the related tables. Make sure that they are all selected, which are 3 additional ones, and click Finish. Notice that they've all been successfully imported. They're within Power Pivot for us now. Order detail status, orders, and products. Creating our first Power Pivot table. Ones that we have already and are familiar with Power Pivot, the connection, the workbook, importing the data, we have to start looking at the selecting your tables, the columns in them, which is something we have already previously achieved. But it's much easier done through a demo again. Let's take a look at it. We have all of our tables already imported, as noted here. Let's go ahead and switch into Excel. Now it's time to create our Power Pivot table. And clicking Insert and Pivot Table will lead us to choosing our external data source, which is Access Northwind, and its tables contained within. We click OK and do it in a new worksheet. Notice that you could choose either Active or All. It's easier to have all selected so that you don't have to be switching between. Let's expand Order Details. This is what would contain most of our transactions. And what we're looking for is the quantity, and it should be showing up, the unit price. Notice that our numbers are there, but there is no way to distinguish how they're tied with their data. In other words, we can't tell what type of product it was or category. Let's expand products and look for that missing data. If we go category, notice what happens. We get baked goods and mixes, which is the category of all the products, how they're grouped, but we're still not getting the product name. We are missing something, and we finally find it. Notice what happens when we do that. We have the baked goods and mixes that is compounded and summarized by 85 of the Northwind Traders chocolate biscuit mix and the scones. And if our math is correct, it does match correctly. The same here. You could collapse these if you wanted, or just keep them expanded. Notice what we have here also on our pane. Let's start focusing in this area. We have filters, we have columns, we have rows and values. What if we wanted to switch the grouping instead of being by category, by product name? Let's take a moment and turn the table around. Notice what happens. The ordering and grouping has been inverted. We could, no need to panic there, we could also revert it as it was. Notice that there's a lot of flexibility here too. Being our first table, we can scroll down and see what the grand totals are. What else could we do? If we want to prettify it, we could highlight the column and make it formatted with some decimal points. They're all zeros, so that doesn't make much sense. So let's go back and remove them and leave it at a comma. That looks a lot better. Just like the numbers of the quantity here too. And we could also change the name. These are either categories or products. Well, this should ring a bell and give us a better description. Categories and product name. Notice that we've enhanced our pivot table for being the first one, making it our own and giving us a bit more of details that we were not made readily available out of the box when dragging and dropping the data. That said, the data is for you to modify, and we encourage you to explore further. There's a lot more to Power Pivot. Just as we mentioned before, you have your tabs, you have Analyze, you have Design. The worst that can happen is that you can always click or point to somewhere where you shouldn't have, but remember, there's always Control-Z and File and Save. That will always be one of your best allies.